everyone. I'm Lisa Rickard, president of the U.S. Chamber's Institute for Legal Reform. I'm sure you all remember that classic scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. For Indiana Jones, who was battling booby traps, wild animals, and hostile terrain, it was a jungle out there. For many of you here today, your legal landscape is becoming almost as dangerous. We chose this year's theme, in case you haven't figured it out, because modern litigation resembles a jungle more than ever. Number one, first, dealing with litigation has become much more complex and difficult to navigate. Have your company's legal and compliance burdens become smaller in the last decade? I sincerely doubt it. Second, the litigation terrain has become much more dangerous. The consequences of your legal battles are more costly, the reputational harm enormous. And these days, litigation really isn't just a nuisance, but it can threaten your company's very existence. Third, the constantly changing nature of the litigation landscape requires a lot more agility. Let's all face it, the litigation jungle is a treacherous environment. It carries a very high risk today, increasing its impact on almost every aspect of your company's planning and operations. And it's almost impossible to navigate this terrain alone. And that's why we're all here at Jungle Base Camp. Today, we're going to explore the litigation jungle together with experts who can guide us through very challenging terrain, helping us to manage our risks and understand the rapidly evolving landscape. So let's start with my first point of complexity. Honestly, it's almost impossible to describe in simple terms what litigation is today. The evolving role of general counsels is a direct reflection of how complicated the litigation landscape has become. Perhaps there are a few of us in the room today who remember the corporate legal world 25 or 30 years ago when legal departments took up a floor or two in your headquarters. Now, larger companies have many floors filled with legal and compliance staff. When I started my career, a company's legal department was mostly a service function. Today, it provides a strategic function. GCs are not just the company's top lawyer, they're strategists who are key players in the company's biggest decisions. Not only is the role of the general counsel becoming more complex, but so is the litigation that they're being asked to handle. I don't have to tell this group that. And as a result, the ever-changing nature of litigation requires GCs to look more often to outside expertise for help. In fact, a survey released just last week found the increase in complexity of the work of corporate legal departments will result in almost $2 billion more in spending on outside law firms in 2018 compared to 2017. Take that back to your CFO. The survey also showed that lawsuits are multiplying faster than corporate legal teams can really handle. Take, for example, the rapid growth of securities class action lawsuits. The number of these filings in the first half of this year alone was more than double the half-year average of the past 2 decades. Okay, we can't forget how the growth of multi-district litigation, which as you all know is tremendously complex, has also challenged your legal departments. There are 125,000 cases in federal MDLs today, and that's 62% more than 10 years ago. MDLs now make up a significant portion of all cases in federal courts across the country. The complexity of the cases is also a contributing factor to how much longer they're taking to adjudicate. U.S. federal court data shows that in fiscal year 2016, the median time it took between a case being filed and going to trial was 25.6 months. Back in 1997, the time to trial was just 18 months. So these cases are more complex, more expensive, more voluminous, and more time-consuming. And let's not forget that the cast of characters on the prowl has expanded. A few years ago, you might have faced a legal action from a group of state attorneys general who have hired the same outside plaintiff's lawyer to represent them, just coincidentally. Today, you're dealing with these states plus lawsuits from cities, counties, and even school districts on the very same matter. On top of that, you have multiple federal government agencies piling on. This was noted as well in last week's survey, where I put a quote up here. The worst case scenario is the government announces an investigation, you get all other litigation related to that, all of a sudden you've got 4, 5 cases where you might have had 1 or 2. The total exposure is much larger than it used to be. I should note here that we also have the EU and European state governments adding to this increasingly complex litigation map. Last month in Brussels, I presented the findings of a European-wide study on the need for safeguards in what will be, as we were told directly by the European Justice Commissioner, an EU-wide directive mandating that member countries put a class action lawsuit system into place. Hold on to your hats, everyone. All of the complexity I've described, of course, is directly correlated to an increased danger that comes in the form of the potency of the litigation that you face. Companies today aren't just litigating against enterprising trial lawyers with novel legal theories. Increasingly, your companies are being systematically stalked and hunted. Trial lawyer ads against medical devices or drugs are a really great example of that litigation jungle, and your companies are the prey. And the stakes are rising. One company was recently hit with an initial verdict of $1 billion in Texas in a single case, and they have 1,600 more of those cases to go. So let me be clear here. This discussion is really not just about big companies. Small businesses face the dangers of the lawsuit jungle as well. One slip and fall lawsuit, one drive-by ADA claim can be the end for a small business, period. And the newest, juiciest prey in the litigation jungle may very well be the tech world. Consider the legal risks associated with autonomous vehicles or the Internet of Things, and then think about the dangers associated with personal data in our online world. We all know about that. So while governments play catch-up on the laws that govern technology, the trial bar is more than willing to apply for and argue for their craft serving as a substitute for regulation. Their words, not mine. Nothing adds to complexity and danger like constant change. New species appear in the litigation jungle all the time. Like litigation funders who are now going through their own really rapid evolution. In less than a decade, third-party litigation funding has grown from a small industry in Australia into a multi-billion-dollar global menace. The world's largest funders reported income growth in a single year of over 100%. And practically every month, they announce new offices and new services across the globe. They're starting law firms, they're portfolio funding, and they're even crowdsourcing. Funders are utilizing sophisticated ways of securing large profits without any obligation, fiduciary duty, or loyalty to claimants, nothing in the best interests of the claimants. I mentioned multi-district litigation earlier. How about no-injury lawsuits? That's a jungle beast that we didn't know 10 years ago. Had anyone heard of lawsuits 20 years ago over the meaning of the word natural? Yet today, that's the top claim in food labeling litigation. It is indeed a jungle out there, but it's one that must be tamed. So it seems right to host this Lawsuit Jungle Summit in the Chamber's Hall of Flags. This room takes its name from the banners, if you haven't noticed those banners, take a look, of 12 great explorers who blazed the paths of trade, planted the first seeds of industrial growth and in this new world, and which at that time, it must have looked and felt like a complex and dangerous jungle. From Cabot to Vespucci, from La Salle to Ponce de Leon and Cabot and Cortez, all these explorers had faith that as risky and dangerous as the New World was, they could make it through. They all undoubtedly had their own experts to help guide them, and they took great risks to accomplish their goals. They learned the new terrain, and in their own way, they tamed their jungles. So today, our goal is to work together to find ways to tame our own litigation jungle. And while we're never going to eliminate that jungle, we can map it and we can navigate it. So let's get to work. Thank you all for being here today.
Ladies and gentlemen.